Welcome to Seller Sessions. I am your host today, Sharon Even, and today I am so excited to have Meghla and Margaret here from the India Sourcing Network. How are you ladies doing?
Hi, Sharon. We're doing well. Thank you so much for having us.
Hi, Sharon.
Hi. We had you on the show. I mean, you guys have been on the show many times, especially Meghla, even before I joined. But we had you on the show less than a year ago when Meghla was still living in Singapore, but a lot has changed since then. But before we get into it, for anyone who doesn't know you guys, do you want to just give a really quick, I'm sure everyone knows you, especially Meghla, but before we start, let's start off with a quick intro and then we'll get into it.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. So my name is Meghla Bhardwaj. I am the co-founder of India Sourcing Network, and my background is basically in sourcing. I've been in the sourcing industry for over 20 years. I worked in India, the Philippines, China for 10 years, Singapore, and now back to India, full circle. And I'm also the co-founder of India Sourcing Trip.
Amazing. Meghla, you also worked for a really long time with Global Sources, right? Still kind of do.
Yes.
Well.
Still do, yeah. I still do consultancy for them. So yeah, but for almost 19 years, I worked for them.
That's amazing. Margaret, how are you? Quick intro.
Okay, thanks, Sharon. Yes, look, I'm Margaret Jolly, and I'm also the co-founder of India Sourcing Network and India Sourcing Trip, working along with the fantastic Meghla, the queen of organisation, we call her, with whatever we do. And look, my background is, well, I've been in different businesses all my life, and started working with the Amazon system in early 2017 and started sourcing from India later that year. And the rest is history. We met Meghla and here we are now.
So Meghla, so Margaret, you come from an Amazon sellers side of things first. You know what it's like to actually,
yes, I did. Yeah.
And then you started to source from India, and that's how you got into the whole ecosystem with Meghla, etc. But you also understand what it's like to be a seller first and work with
exactly,
with
yeah,
Indian suppliers.
And look, we started off with China. I had some 5 or 6 products from China initially, and we were actually going to Canton, running away to Canton, and we stopped in Hong Kong and stumbled across a mega fair there, and there was it suppliers from all around the globe actually, and a section of it, and we stumbled across these Indian products, and I just went, oh, look at this, and I was in love, and that was it. Like, we got to Canton and went, oh, let's just have a bus trip around Guangzhou, and we didn't really spend much time at Canton after that because I'd decided I was moving to India, and that was October 2017, and that's
amazing.
We've been there ever since. Yeah,
that's amazing. So Meghla, you left Singapore and you moved back to India, which was a big move. I was just saying before that, like, well done to you. Take off the hat to you and say well done, because it's not an easy move. So especially having a child moving overseas at your son's age, not easy. So well done. What can you tell us about, so first of all, you can tell us why you moved, because I already know the answer, but it gives even more emphasis to what you're doing. And second of all, what it's like on ground now in India.
Yeah. So there are a couple of reasons I moved. And one of the biggest reasons is because India Sourcing Network and everything that we're doing is growing really fast. So I wanted to, manage things on the ground here, expand the team. And this is really, I think, a once in a lifetime opportunity, so to speak. From my perspective, where India's exports are growing so fast and the whole industry is growing. So yeah, that's one of the main reasons. And then there were personal reasons as well. So, but primarily driven by profession.
I think it just really shows though how committed you are to, the India Sourcing Trip and the India Sourcing Network. I don't know a lot of people that have moved, necessarily to the country because of it. So it just shows your commitment. So yeah, well done to you.
I'm very passionate about this, Sharon. I mean, it really feels like, my calling, so to speak. Yeah. I know it sounds dramatic, but
I get it.
It really feels like that. So
amazing. So what can you give us? We've done a show in the past on the podcast about sourcing from India, what that looks like, etc. But like I said, back then, I think you either had just launched India Sourcing Network or just about to launch. I don't think it was at its peak like it is. I mean, I'm sure it's not at its absolute peak. I'm sure you're just going to continue to grow and grow and grow. but a lot's changed since then. So now that you're also in India, let's come up with some updates, and I'll also explain why this is important. You know, I work a lot with one-on-one sellers beyond just being a seller myself, and I hear how many sellers are scared with what will be with China, what's going to happen with China. A lot of people, because it's so easy to source from China, a lot of people are used to that. But a lot of people are also starting to work on backup plans, and not just backup plans, changing the way that they source. And India is probably one of the best solutions to that. And that's why I feel like it was important when I last interviewed you, but I feel like so much has happened, unfortunately, in the world since then, that it's even more important now. So what kind of updates can you give us about what's happening on the ground?
Yeah. So first of all, I totally agree with you. I think, people were talking about diversification earlier, but post-COVID and, with all the supply chain issues, diversification is not an option. It's a necessity. You just have to do it. So the one thing that I'm really seeing over here is, first of all, exports are growing exponentially. I'll just throw out some numbers. So in the year 2021, 2022, and this is the financial year, exports hit a record of $418 billion, which is a growth of 40% year on year over the previous financial year. So of course, it's much lower than what China's exports are, but 40% growth is really, really significant. And the other thing that I'm seeing is that the government is really putting a lot of emphasis on the manufacturing and export sectors over here. So for example, there were recently some treaties that were signed with different countries. So for example, Australia, there was a foreign trade agreement that was signed with Australia where 95% of Indian goods imported into Australia will be duty-free, no duties at all. Similarly, a similar agreement was signed with UAE. Again, a lot of the exports from India will be duty-free to the UAE. Also, what I'm seeing is that there are a lot of electronics, factories coming up, and they're not necessarily like the electronics factories that we see in China that are sort of producing consumer electronics like power banks and chargers. Those things are still better sourced in India. But we're seeing, first of all, a lot of the large MNC electronics companies setting up their factories here to cater to the domestic market. So for example, Apple and Xiaomi, Foxconn, for example, they're setting up factories to produce their electronics products to cater to the domestic market and also to export. And what's happening because of that is the overall supply chain is developing. And once the supply chain develops, then there'll be more products that will be manufactured. There are some factories that are, for example, manufacturing headphones now. That's one category that people have started doing. There's some factories doing power banks, but of course not at the scale as what is happening in China. There are also a lot of very niche electronic categories, such as electronics for surveillance cameras, CCTV cameras. Now, those companies are, really big companies with high-tech setups, and they're doing OEM production for large volume brands and buyers overseas. So they're not catering to, like private label sellers who want to source just, 5,000 pieces or something like that. They're, entering into long-term agreements, and these are like $1 million deals where these factories are producing, on an OEM basis for really large companies. So that is happening, and the government is putting a lot of effort and investment into trying to bring in some of this, investment over here. Also, mobile phone exports, for example, grew 75% in the financial year 2021-22. Wow. And most of these exports are, of course, driven by Apple and Samsung. But, it's a sign of things to come. That this is how things started in China. And once the supply chain develops, then it's going to be, it's going to develop even more. Yeah. And we also find, more Amazon sellers coming to India, not only for the traditional metal wood products that India makes, but also other types of products. We're also seeing something very interesting, that a lot of people who are very experienced in China and not Amazon e-commerce sellers, these are traditional, importers, wholesalers, people who supply to maybe big retail stores. They want to join the trip and they want to source from India, because they are also looking to diversify. So it's not only the new e-commerce sellers, it's traditional importers as well. We have one person joining the trip who has been sourcing from China for 35 years, and now he wants to diversify and see what's in India. So we're organizing factory tours for them, etc. So yeah, I think these are some of the things that we are seeing over there. New categories emerging, electronics being sort of the focus. India has also announced that the first semiconductor facility is going to be, set up soon in the next couple of years, and there's an investment of about $20 billion that's going into that facility, and there's a lot of foreign investment in that facility as well, and that is, I think, going to be a turning point in manufacturing electronics in India, because currently all of the chips basically have to come from China or Taiwan or other countries. So that is a big limitation. But once that happens, then that's going to be a huge turning point. Another industry that we're seeing that's growing and the government is also focusing on is toys. And traditionally, India, makes like wooden toys, and there are maybe those sensory kind of toys that are available. But now we're also seeing companies investing in plastic toys. There's this huge company in South India called Microplastics, and they have recently invested in really advanced facilities and 3D printing and sample making and a lot of software as well to make different types of toys. So that is another sector. There's also a toy fair that is going to come up in August, and it's going to be a smaller fair initially, but I think it will grow gradually. But that is one of the focus industries by the government. Another thing I want to say is that in terms of COVID, all factories are open over here. There are no restrictions in terms of COVID. There are, of course, still some COVID cases, but it's sort of become endemic now, and people are used to it. People are still wearing masks outdoors, for example, in malls or other areas. Masks are still mandatory, but otherwise, everything is pretty much open. There are no restrictions as such. And, it's business as usual. You wouldn't know that there was a pandemic here just, 6 months ago. Yeah. So, yeah, those are some of the things that I see over here, firsthand now that I've moved to India.
You mentioned toys, and we spoke a little bit before we started recording, and I said, even today, I feel like there is really no competition to China when it comes to toys. And many people that sell toys, they really have no choice but to go to somewhere like China. So hearing that India is investing in that category, which is such a huge category, is exciting, if I may say. It's pretty exciting. You also mentioned to me, because now that you're living in India again, obviously you've come back, you've also mentioned to me that domestically you're seeing like a big difference in general when it comes to digital. And the reason I bring that up is a lot of people that I've communicated with that have possibly wanted to source from India, they have complained about I'm trying to think about how to put it, the lack of communication from India's suppliers and how long it takes Indian suppliers to answer and things like that. So is that something that you've seen change? Like you've seen, an improvement in?
So in terms of communication, I think that is changing gradually, and that is definitely an issue. Suppliers are, slower to respond, but that's because suppliers are they're more used to customization, and they're more used to, longer product development time. It's not like China, where a lot of the products are sort of off the shelf and you just make slight modifications. So most suppliers are still used to that sort of, product development process, where the buyer comes to them and says, this is what I want, and here are my specifications. Then the supplier goes back and talks to their R&D team and, does a prototype and everything, and then goes back to the supplier, to the buyer after a couple of weeks. So they're still sort of in that mindset. But in China, it's different. In China, it's like, okay, what's your prices? Here, I've got this Excel file with, my 50 models that I've got to offer, and choose 50, choose whatever, and make slight modifications. So I think it'll take some time for India to switch to that mindset. So that is still an issue, but I feel that it really depends on the supplier as well. Like some suppliers in our network, for example, are super quick to respond, and they've got processes in place and proper workflows in place to make sure that they respond to buyers. But in terms of digitization, what I'm seeing is that, especially in payments and transactions, like locally, everything is digitized. Like since I've moved here, I have not been to an ATM, or maybe just once I've been to an ATM. And I just like to have some cash just in case.
Yeah.
But otherwise, everything is paid digitally. So even, the helper who comes to my house, for example, I pay her salary via her, via the phone. So there's literally an app for everything. I haven't been to the grocery store since I've come here. Everything is online. So even if I have to order groceries, they're delivered within 30 minutes. Of course, there's Amazon for all sorts of things. And most of the things that I've bought for my home, for example, I bought off of Amazon. But otherwise, there's so many different apps. And so this is one big change that I'm seeing over here. And it had started before COVID, but I think it's just accelerated after COVID, and everything is online. And there are a lot of startups. So tech startups are coming up in different areas. And, currency and international payments, that is a big area that these startups are focusing on. Because again, e-commerce and global expansion is one of the areas that the government is focusing on. So there's a lot of, there are companies called like Exim Pay and there are Taza Pay and a lot of different companies that are focusing on bringing solutions for paying overseas buyers, for example, or receiving payments. So cross-border payments basically.
Amazing. And Margaret, what kind of updates can you give us on shipping? Because for a lot of people, when they go to source from China, for example, you speak to a supplier, everything's a one-stop shop, and it's maybe seems like it's easier. And even though there's been, the lockdown in Shanghai for so long, and there's been a lot of crap going on with China, with India specifically, what's going on with shipping today?
Look, shipping hasn't really been an issue at all through COVID, as in getting goods out. And I mean, for those of you who don't understand, India has one major port that most of the products leave from, which is Mumbai or Nhava Sheva port. And the actual, those products then go on the ship, and you ship into New York instead of going into California. So that's been one thing that I think has been a bit of a godsend for us. So we have never got caught up in that California, bulk of held up shipments and the whole logistics thing over there. So that's been really good. So I think, we might have stuck a couple of times in really, October or something, where it, took an extra 3 or 4 days to get, the cargo off the ship and through customs, but hasn't been major at all. And there are a couple of smaller ports that some other goods go to, which go a different route. And so they still take a little bit longer, because to go into New York, it's only 21 days from port to port. If you go from down south, I think it's probably about 33 or 35 days or something like that. So in that respect, we haven't really had many issues at all. And I think with the cost of shipping, we never got anywhere near China's price. I think the highest we got to is about, 14,000 for a 40-foot container. It's down to, floating around the 12, something like that. It moves, as you know, every few days. Mm-hmm. So the cost of shipping is probably, it's still higher than it's, ever been, but I don't know whether anywhere in the world will go back to that, $4,000 a container or something like that. So I think, position-wise, that I think, and look, I think the biggest problem thing that people moving from China to India is, you go to a supplier and say, how long for that? And they're going to say to you maybe 60, 90 days if it is a custom-made, handmade product. Obviously, it's not, China, where you just press the button and, print out 10,000 or whatever of these things today. So that's something that I think you just need to take into account. But look, once you get into the flow of it, you just know, like, my shipment's leaving, you'll look at your stock and go, right, it's going to take me another, 16 weeks to get that into, Amazon again. So you need to just forward plan your stock a little bit better. I think that's probably the only, I think, thing that people really find difficult and find, I suppose, annoying. But, and look, Indian suppliers, we were talking to someone yesterday, and they said, oh, look, my supplier's really good. He'll let me make some extra stock and keep some back, so you don't have to actually pay for it. They'll hold it, for another 8 weeks, something, and you can reship. And, so it's just a matter of, getting into that, because the relationships I find in India are much easier. To deal, like a supplier will work with you a lot more. Like I think, see it as, you're an extension of each other's business. And it's not just, a sale. It's, a relationship that they want to have long term and keep you on their sort of books forever, and and they're like your family. I would say my supplier is more like part of the family than just
a supplier.
Yeah. So I think it's a lot different. So it's just something that you've got to get used to, and I think you've just got to be a little bit more patient, because I do think they have a work-life balance. They still like have Sunday off. They don't work all night 24/7. Most of them. There's a few factories that do, but it is a little bit of a different lifestyle, I think, in India to China.
I was just thinking as we were speaking, with China having consolidated containers, it's really easy if you have just a small shipment, etc. It's really easy to do that. How easy is it to move stock out of India if you've just got like 10 boxes, for example?
Well, we wouldn't, advise you to use like this, freight forwarder sea shipper, because it just would be too expensive unless you worked with one of the freight forwarders and sort of said, like, I want to do a consolidation. Have you got other, products going, which, you can do. But I think, I suppose there are other ways you can, do the DHL and other forms for very small shipments. But, it's sort of more advisable to do, well, it doesn't have to be a container load. I mean, you can do, it's not that expensive to get a smaller shipment on a ship. It's just the extra duties and things, those standard fees that you get stuck with that can, increase your price. So I would say, to people, don't go, shipping 200 pieces. But I mean, if you're in China, you can't ship 200 anyway. Most people, what do you have to buy? An order of 1,000. So, if you've got 1,000 pieces, it's not that expensive. It doesn't work out that expensive to ship. Say a standard size shoe box or something, you'd probably only be paying, $2.50 or something, a piece by the time you got through customs and, transported each end and all that delivered. So, but I think that's the other thing. People in China probably used to DDP, whereas what happens more in India, it's you do FOB and then use a shipper with a customs broker in place at the other end. So, but then the benefit is you're not paying for your customs duties and your shipping until it's actually landed in the States. So you don't actually pay for that up front. So, you just pay for your goods up front, hand them over to the shipper, and then you've got another month really before you pay your shipper and your customs.
Which helps with cash flow, obviously.
So it's quite.
What a lot of, again, because I have, and part of this is also me, but I also, because I have a, one-on-one relationship with the people the sellers that I work with, I feel that a lot of Americans, specifically my American clients who are Amazon sellers, speak a lot about the fear that they have between how much it's worsening the relationship between America and China. And what is the relationship like between India and America?
Yeah, so I think that the relationship between India and America is pretty good. There are no, tensions as such. There were some tensions because of the Russia-Ukraine war, because India had sort of a neutral stance. And India is usually very neutral in most, such situations. But I think there was a bit of tension, like geopolitical tensions because of that. But otherwise, the relationships are pretty good. There are some, significant trade deals. India is also like buying a lot of, weapons, etc., from the US. So, I don't see any, serious issues that would affect trade relationships as such.
And what are the tariffs like? Because, obviously when you're sourcing from China, you have the Trump tariffs on Chinese goods. What are tariffs like when it comes to India? There's not a trade agreement between India and America, right? No.
Yes, there used to be, but now there's not. India is not in that trade agreement. But tariffs are pretty low for most categories. So most products that Amazon sellers would source, they would be, maybe from 2 to 4%, maximum 8%. Many products don't have any duties at all. But in general, it's about 2 to maximum 8% or so for sort of the wooden, metal products that Amazon sellers typically source.
which some wooden or metal products, especially wooden products, etc., coming from China could have 20+% tariffs on them. So that's something to think about as well. Okay, what can you guys tell us about the eco-friendly category and how that's becoming more of a thing in India?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've noticed after coming here is that there is a lot of focus on being eco-friendly, recycling, sustainable living. There's a lot of focus on all of that. And I see it in daily life. So for example, if you shop anything, in a store or get it delivered home, it's always in a paper bag. There's no plastic packaging. Sometimes there's no packaging at all. So the guy will come with a big bag and, so if you've ordered groceries, for example, he'll just, put the bag down on the floor and take out all the stuff from his bag. So there's no packaging. Amazon is also pretty good with their packaging here because there's a lot of pressure on Amazon to not be wasteful in their packaging. And they have got like a lot of, specific initiatives that they have over here to be eco-friendly, especially in their packaging. Like I know in the US, they're pretty wasteful. They'll ship like a really small item in a very, very big box. And, they also use a lot of plastic, etc. So, so that's one thing that I'm noticing over here. It's not only in the packaging, but also if you go to any of the malls, for example, there's a lot of focus on recycling, sustainability. In terms of the factories, we're also seeing focus on no plastic packaging, especially if they're doing product that's made out of natural materials like wood, metal, rattan, etc. They don't want to use plastic because the product itself is eco-friendly or is made out of natural materials. So, they want to do a plastic-free packaging, and that's sort of their USP. Some of the factories are also investing in solar panels. And so they want to be eco-friendly. They want to have a neutral carbon footprint. So they're investing in solar panels and installing solar panels in their factories. So that is another trend that we are seeing in the manufacturing industry. So not only are they trying to produce eco-friendly products, but also manufacture sustainably. Also, we're seeing a lot of brands locally that are producing products that are made out of recycled materials that are really becoming very, very popular. For example, there's this shoe brand and they make all of their shoes from recycled plastic water bottles. And these are literally water bottles that are, taken out from the ocean or whatever. They would have been in the dumps, and they would have ended up in the oceans. But these water bottles are being collected and they are being turned into shoes. And this brand is hugely popular in India. And recently, even, I think the finance minister tweeted about it. And so it became like a really big thing over here. So a lot of local brands are also focusing on using eco-friendly materials. If you go to any store, like, any of the cosmetics stores, for example, you'll see the bags. They're also made out of either recycled cotton or recycled paper, or, there's some sort of eco-friendly element to the packaging specifically and to the products, of course. So if somebody's looking for sourcing eco-friendly products, or if you want to go into that niche, then I think India is a really good place to source, because you not only find eco-friendly products that are made out of natural materials, but also you'll have stories that the suppliers can tell about how they are being, eco-friendly. And there's this one company I want to talk about, and they produce plant-based, bags. So the materials that they use are actually plant-based. And they produce bags, belts, and lots of beautiful different fashion accessories. And they use things like cactus leather, or cork, which is very eco-friendly. Now the problem is that, okay, if your material is eco-friendly, what about the components like the zippers or the buttons? How do you make those things eco-friendly? So they have actually looked at each and every component of the product, and they have tried to be eco-friendly. So for example, if they have to use straps, they will collect waste leather from, or waste, any material from other factories to add, to use as straps, for example, if they have to add embellishments or any sort of, value adds. So they take scraps from other factories and then recycle them. The zips that they use, they're also made out of recycled metal. And then even the buttons are, there's some element of eco-friendliness or recycled sustainability in everything that they do. Their packaging, of course, is totally plastic free. And even on their social media, they're posting about how their company is trying to be carbon neutral and the employees as well. So it's a really nice, story that you can add to your brand. I feel that the product is manufactured in a very sustainable way.
To also, we've got that one, sorry, Sharon, one supplier that does the cornstarch bag. So instead of having to use a poly bag, he's now producing, they're out of cornstarch. They look like a poly bag, but they're biodegradable. So you put it in the ground and in a year it's gone. So I think that's another thing that's, really good, to not have, if you need something, like some products don't need to be in a box or, and a cloth bag's not really ideal for Amazon. So these polystarch, poly bags, or what are we going to call them, Meghla? Cornstarch bags. People don't know what they are then.
Yeah. So they look
are really good.
They look just like a poly bag, but in reality, it's not plastic.
Yeah, you can get them. They now make them clear, because they were making them, in colour, and then we said no, we need them clear, and now they've got them in clear. So I mean that's a great, and they're not much more expensive than an actual poly bag. And I mean, even if it was half a cent or something for a bag, I mean, are you going to quibble over that if you're selling an organic product and then you're putting it in a poly bag? It's sort of a bit counterintuitive, really, isn't it? It's not, it spoils it.
I don't know too much about Amazon's climate friendly. They have, I think it's called climate friendly. I've got a
climate pledge friendly.
Yes, the climate pledge. But I think that I don't know too much about it because I'm not a part of it. But I do know that it's something that they've been pushing, because I've been getting emails about it as well, even though it's been around for a good couple of years. But that's also something to think about if you're sourcing from a supplier who, in general, the way they manufacture, et cetera, is eco-friendly, and the products are sustainable and the packaging is sustainable. That could also get you that badge as well, which is something that the world, I feel like, is slowly moving more towards, especially in America, as well. So that's something interesting to think about as well. I'm going to look into those cornstarch bags, because I've not heard of that before as well. So I did have a question while you were speaking about factories, and I've forgotten it now, so it'll come up in the meantime. But so we spoke a little bit about, so you guys are doing a sourcing trip to India. Let's tell people a little bit about that, because for the day-to-day sellers, sourcing from India can seem, I'm not saying it can seem like more of a headache than sourcing from China. China, you go onto Alibaba, you find a supplier, you reach out to them. It's, and I think that's kind of part of what your network has also built to try and make that, obviously, that process easier. But there's nothing like actually physically going to India and meeting with these suppliers. So can you tell us a little bit about your trip and what people can expect and what they can gain from being a part of it?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm just going to play a video for those people who are watching the video. They can just watch this video in the background while I talk about the trip. So yeah, so this is basically an 8-day sourcing trip that we do to India. And, the reason that we started this trip was because a lot of people were, as you said, hesitant. They didn't know what to expect. And so what better way to, experience the products than to go there. So the trip is organized in a way to, first of all, help people learn all about sourcing from India. So we do a 1-day conference where we teach people about, logistics and how shipping works and how to find and vet suppliers. And we've also got other brands from the US that have been sourcing products from India and that have been very successful. So that's one aspect. It's all about learning. Then the second aspect is sourcing. So we visit a trade show that is considered the Canton Fair of India. Of course, it's much smaller than the real Canton Fair in China, which is, I don't know, like 40,000 booths or something. But this has about 4,000 booths, and they're all export-focused suppliers. So if you're thinking of, sourcing from India, whether you come on the trip or not, you can always attend this trade show. This is one of the most important trade shows for importers from India. And it's organized by the Export Promotion Council for Handicrafts, which is a government organization. So all of the suppliers at the trade show are very high quality suppliers because they're vetted, they're members of this council. and they're all export experienced. If a supplier is not export experienced, they're not able to join this this council. So, that's one thing. And when you're sourcing from India, you do want to source from export experienced suppliers. That is really important because domestic companies might not be aware of overseas requirements, safety requirements, etc. So sourcing, and then we also visit a couple of factories. So we visit one factory in and around Delhi. And then we also visit another factory that is, we're adding another factory tour trip to Moradabad, the city of Moradabad. Now that's where most of the metal and wooden products are manufactured. And most Amazon sellers we're seeing, they're seeing success with these types of products, home decor, home gift items that are made out of metal and wood. And this is really India's, one of the main categories from India. There's a lot of mango wood products, for example, that are not found in other countries, especially China. A lot of brass and other types of metal products as well. And, there's textiles too. So you can visit these factories and you can see the products and you can see how they're manufactured. In terms of factories, people ask me, like, what are the factories like in India? Are they, really small factories like workshops, or are they huge factories like there are in China? So it's a mix. There are small workshop types of factories as well. Where you probably don't want to source from those types of factories, but at the same time they're also really large, well-established factories. A lot of the factories that are in and around Delhi, for example, they do stitching and sewing kind of work. So there's apparel, garments, bags, those kinds of products are actually manufactured in and around Delhi. And then the third aspect of the trip is cultural experience. So we basically take you to Taj Mahal, which is one of the 7 wonders of the world. We do a Bollywood night where you can dress up in Indian attire and wear saris and wear turbans, put henna tattoos, and just experience Indian culture. And one of the things that we have this time is on almost every night, we have drinks and dinner. We have networking drinks, and drinks are like, drink as much as you want, 2 hours of free alcoholic beverages. So that's a deal that I've been able to, make with the hotel that we are staying in, because like I'm here now. So, it's easier to have that. As well, because of what's going on in the world, I think a lot of people are looking to diversify. And yeah, what better way to diversify and experience a new sourcing market than to go there?
My internet was unstable for 1 second. So did you speak about the fact that you guys are also sponsoring children, or not? Not yet.
No, I didn't speak about that. So we're also sponsoring children, and this is a non-government organization that I have been supporting for quite a few years. And what we do is, for every attendee that joins the trip, we sponsor the education of a child for 1 year. And it's not much, it's $100, but it allows the child to receive books and stationery for their school year. So, that really helps keep a child in school. And this is something that Mark, Kevin, and I, all 3 of us, are very passionate about. We want to give back to society, and we always talk about, how brands should do this as well. So we want to practice what we preach. And attendees have the option of continuing the sponsorship as well. So they can continue to pay $100 a year after the first year and continue to sponsor a child. And it's so good because every couple of months you receive an update, and sometimes the child will send a card to you or wish you, Happy New Year. So it's really nice to see how a child really develops and grows if you're kind of sponsoring them and supporting them.
That's amazing. In regards to while you were showing, so for the people listening in the podcast, in the background, Meghla was showing a video of what to expect from the trip. And while I was looking at, I was thinking about how if you are thinking of, or even are already sourcing from India, flying specifically to India, meeting the suppliers, understanding the culture. My husband traveled India for a year. India is one of my husband's, I don't know if I ever told you this, India is one of my husband's favorite countries ever.
What?
And yeah, he's traveled around India for a whole year. He has told me so much about, I need to visit India. But
yes, you need to.
Yeah, I do. I've not been in India, but I was thinking about how there's a difference between communicating with a supplier when you don't really know much about the culture, when you haven't had that sort of experience, than when you have, right? Because once you've actually been in India, you've seen the culture, you've been a part of it, you know, you've been to trade shows, you've spoken to manufacturers, etc. I feel like it's just going to, I don't know, make the sourcing a lot, building that relationship with the suppliers and make the sourcing a lot easier in the future when you actually understand, because every single country that I've ever sourced from, the culture is different. The culture in China and India is different. The culture in Poland and China is different, which is another place I source from. And the expectations you also have from the supplier needs to be like adjusted to that specific culture. Like you said, in India, they don't work on Sunday. So if you haven't got an answer back, it's because of that. So really understanding the culture, I think, is something that is important when you're, you know, taking your business seriously and sourcing, for example, from India. I think that that's something, the fact that you guys put emphasis on the culture in your trip is important.
Yeah, and I think Mark can talk a little bit about this because she visited her factory in Moradabad when we went to India in 2019. So Mark, do you want to share, like, how did your relationship change after you met them face to face? Well, actually, you had met them in Hong Kong.
Yeah, we actually met. It's actually a family business. It's gone from, I don't know, 1920 or something, and it's, you know, it's passed through the generations. And we've actually been to the supplier's home actually and met Granddad, who not Granddad didn't start the factory, but he was the one before this, and you know, he's quite elderly, but he's still living with the family. But I found that, like, when we met them, I just found they were so easy to deal with, because number one, we could communicate really easily, and I just find nothing is a problem. Like, if I ring my supplier up and I say, can I do this? Yeah, whatever you want, Mark, not a problem, Mark. And I mean, some people say they have trouble getting like a response or something, but look, we use just sort of message, mainly most of the time on Messenger, and if I send him a message, unless he's away or something, he'll come back to me in half an hour. It might be, I'm busy, I'll come back to you, or yeah, whatever you want. And I find that is really, really nice. And then, like, once we went over there and we said we were going to stay, we stayed in a really nice hotel not very far from their factory, but they would pick us up each day, take us to the factory, and we'd have lunch there, and then every night they took us to their home and we had dinner, and you know, got to know the family, and you know, I've met the dog, and so now when we're speaking, how's the dog going, and daughter got married, and do you know what I mean? There's always something like that. And the last night we were there, they said, because it was a rather nice home, and he sort of said, oh, now come with me. And we went up to this third floor, and he said, so next time you come, you're not staying in a hotel. Here's your apartment in our home. You know, you're welcome. Don't you dare. You know, like, it's just so nice to be treated like that. And I think that's the difference. And I think too, just doing your ordering, if you're not there, you know, during the year, if I want to do something, I can just say to him, look, make this product, here's a bit of an idea of what I want, and then we'll just jump on a Zoom call and I can say, put the tape measure on it, show me this. Whereas it's very difficult to do that in China and get it right. I just, you know, found it was a lot, things got lost in translation a lot, because you're usually speaking to, you know, the girl at the front who can speak some English, who goes back out the back, and, you know, it just gets lost along the way by the time you get to the end of the chain. And I think too, the other thing is, I find that unless even the bigger factories, we've had actually a couple of people who have been dealing with some really big factories that do container after container to, you know, Kmart and things like that. And one of the girls rang me, she said, oh, I've got a call with supply, and I'm actually speaking to the owner. Oh my God. And like, she was literally freaking out, going, how am I going to cope with this? And that's what happens over there. You don't get, just because you might be a small buyer starting, they have a bit of respect for you. And, you know, the manager or the owner will initially start the call and see what you really want. And I think all those things make a difference, to, you know, and then build that relationship, and you know, then it's much easier to move forward with that company, and I think you feel more comfortable.
I have two follow-up questions as you were speaking that I was thinking about, not specifically to do with the trip, just in general with sourcing from India. Number one, English in India. What can we tell the listeners about communication-wise when it comes to English in India?
So most of the suppliers that people deal with, they will be quite fluent in English, and it's not going to be a problem. You can, you know, have a conversation on WhatsApp, and they're very comfortable just talking over Zoom also, or just, you know, having a call. So that's not a problem. Of course, not everybody speaks English. You know, if you go to the factory, for example, the workers won't won't speak English, but maybe the supervisors or the managers, they'll be, of course, at different levels, and they have different accents. So if you speak to somebody in the north, they'll have a completely different accent to somebody who's maybe in the south or even in the west. And so each state has their own language, and because of that, the way they speak English or any language is also slightly different. So you might have a bit of trouble understanding them initially, but they're quite fluent. And in fact, in India, because each state has a different language, English is sort of one language that unites the country, so to speak. So, for example, if I'm from the north, if I go to the south, I cannot speak their language. So either we communicate in English, or they speak Hindi or some Hindi, which is sort of the national language. It's the most widely spoken language. But yeah, you wouldn't have a problem communicating with suppliers. Of course, if you come on your own, then maybe, the taxi driver might not speak English, or they might speak very broken English, or just a couple of words here and there. So, or they might, you never know.
Yeah.
They may be well educated as well. So that's sort of a mix. But suppliers definitely are very fluent. A lot of these suppliers are, they're running family businesses. And what happens is maybe it's the second or third generation that's sort of managing the business now. And they've usually studied overseas. So they've maybe gone to the UK or US and done their degree and masters. And then they've come back to manage the family business. So that's quite common in, family run businesses as well.
And then when it comes to customization, which obviously, I already know the answer to this, but I think it's a good question to ask. If you go to something like, to a place like China and you say, I want to make this product and I want to customize it my own way, the answer is always yes. And then they'll figure it out, even if they don't know how, they'll just figure it out. Whereas if you go, for example, to like Vietnam, if you ask them, the answer is always no. And then maybe they'll figure it out. How is it with India? Like if you have, because you know that I'm really, really big on differentiation and if possible, design change and things like that. So when it comes to customizing and changing designs, etc., how open-minded are the Indian suppliers and factories to that? Is it like a in between, or is it, how are they open-minded to that?
So there is sort of a yes culture over here as well, kind of similar to China, but not as prevalent, I would say. So if a supplier thinks that they can do the product, they will say yes. Even if they think that they will figure it out, it's figure outable, then they will say yes. But of course, if they know that they're not going to be able to do it at all, then, they'll straight away say no. A lot of things, you're right. Maybe they'll go find another factory who can do it, or, maybe they'll figure out a way to do it themselves. And then when they come back with the product or with the sample, it's not really what the buyer expected. So this is something that does happen, that, they say, yes, we can do it, but then it doesn't happen the way that the buyer has sort of expected. So it's really important to vet the supplier really well in terms of their capability. What exactly have they done in the past? Have they made a similar product in the past? Have they got the equipment that is needed to make that kind of product? For example, if you need something that's laser cut, do they have in-house laser machines? Do they have, access to maybe a technician that is familiar with using a laser machine, or issues that can arise? Or are they just going to use another workshop that's, down the road to do this laser cutting, for example? So it's really important to vet suppliers really well, ask deep questions. And we always recommend people to have an initial Zoom call with suppliers face to face, and to ask all of these questions to understand their capability, what exactly is their expertise, what is their experience, and then based on that, you select your supplier.
So in your network, do you guys obviously vet suppliers? So you've already done that for the people in your network, right? The suppliers who
yes.
vetted them, and right?
Yes, we vetted them. So we check that they are, legitimate companies, that they're manufacturers, they have their own factories, and that they're exporters. So we check all of their documents to make sure. But then, in terms of capability, we do live sessions with them where this is exactly what we try to do. We try to understand what is their expertise. We ask them questions. We see their products in their showroom. Sometimes we even go to their factories and do live shows from there to see what their capability is. And each supplier is slightly different, maybe like, for example, in Moradabad, there's so many suppliers making metal products, but maybe some suppliers specialize in brass, for example, and that's their expertise. but they might say on their website or whatever, we make metal products, but what metal?
Yeah.
So unless you talk to them face to face and you see the products, you ask them what products they make, what machines they have, what materials they have experience in, you won't really know that. So it's really important to have that discussion. And similarly, laser cutting machines or any sort of finish that you want on your product, for example, if they don't have that in-house capability, then how are they going to be able to do that?
Yeah. Amazing. What else? Is there anything else you guys want to, before we wrap up, tell us about the trip? I don't think you mentioned the dates when you're, yeah.
Yeah. So the dates are October 12th to the 19th. Those dates of the main trip. And then we've got an additional trip to Moradabad, which is from the 19th to the 21st. And, people have already started booking their tickets. We've got quite a few signups already. So there's a lot of excitement, especially because China is still closed. So I think this is a great opportunity and a great time to explore a different market, because you anyways can't go to China. And, so many people usually go to Canton Fair and Global Sources in Hong Kong during April and October. So because that's, most likely not happening again, it's better to try a different country. Why not explore other options? Even if you're not currently sourcing a product that India specializes in, let's say you're doing a totally different product line, which is really only made in China. But I think you should still come to India to explore new categories. Why limit yourself to just one category? Come to India for the products that India really specializes in.
And also to learn the processes of what it looks like to source from India, because like you said, India is putting a lot of time and effort into manufacturing and exporting, etc., in different categories, like you mentioned with toys and with electronics. Probably going to expand more and more in different categories. So even right now, if they don't make or they don't specialize in a specific category, they may in the future as well. And I'm sure in your trip you're going to teach what the whole sourcing journey looks like when it comes to sourcing from India, and also just building relationships in general. I think with manufacturers is something that everyone should be doing.
Yeah, and I think
also want to add that. Go ahead, Mara.
I was just going to say that it's when you actually get to the fair that you find that it's products that sell around the world. They're not just products when we were sort of originally going over, I was thinking, is it going to be a lot of like what we would call Indian looking, products that they would have at home in India? There's very little of that. Most of the products are, what you would find in an American home or a European home. They're all and very on trend. And the manufacturers know, and they can say to you, look, this is the most popular thing in Europe, and this product's doing well in America, because they're dealing with the big, box retailers and all these things all the time. Out of India, like some people I think because it's handmade, expect that you can only get, a few cartons. A lot of the suppliers we interview, we only do containers. They'll only ship by the container. So, it's not what people, I think their perception in your mind is until you get there. And I think that's what a lot of people, I suppose, avoid India, because that's what they think is all that they're going to be able to buy. But the amount of products blows our mind every time we do new suppliers every fortnight, and we go, they're more fantastic products, and they're always different. Even though it might be the same bowl or jug style, the look is, every factory has their own way, or, they might have some beading around it. It might be just something different that's totally different to every other factory that we've interviewed, even though we've, done similar type of factories. It's I think you've got to go to see it. It's really difficult to explain.
I think another thing that I just want to mention is, some people have this misconception that India is super backward and they're like dirt roads and, the highways are broken. It's not like that. The highways are pretty good. The roads are pretty good. Maybe it's not as advanced as in high tech as China in terms of, some of the infrastructure and all, but the roads are pretty fine. We live just outside of Delhi. It's, pretty fine. Of course, there's traffic like any big city. There's also pollution. That's also a big city problem. But otherwise, getting from, point A to point B, there's no problems. Getting products from the factory to the port is not a problem at all. There's different options. There are trucks available. There's also bonded rails available from key manufacturing hubs to ports. There are key ports available on, the East Coast, the West Coast, and South India as well. So wherever you're sourcing from, there is a port. Of course, we always recommend shipping from Mumbai because that is the most cost effective. And also in terms of time, it's best to go to the US East Coast from Mumbai. But yeah, I mean, in terms of infrastructure, India is pretty well advanced. It's not this, backward sort of country that people have this perception of. There are backward areas. There are, villages. There are smaller towns. There are, dirt roads there for sure. But the bigger cities and where the manufacturing and all is happening, they're pretty accessible and quite well developed.
Yeah, I think there's many countries that there's misconception where people think that, it's like, like in Stone Age days where really it isn't. So, yeah. All right, amazing. Where can people find information about the India Sourcing Network and the India Sourcing Trip?
So go to our website, indiasourcingtrip.com. And then indiasourcing.net, that's where to find suppliers in case you want to start sourcing. We also have a Facebook group in case you're interested to join that. So search for Sourcing from India on Facebook, join the group.
I just want to mention that I never really bring, most of my podcast sessions are either alone or with only people that I really have some sort of relationship with. And I never really promote things, but I always, and I said this to you before, I really believe in what you're doing. And I think that diversification and getting sellers to not be so closed-minded and just focus only on China. And I think if anything, now is the time to open your mind and start it's always been important to diversify, but like we said in the beginning, it's even more important now. And I really believe in what you're doing. And that's also the reason why I said, whatever you need, I'm always here. So I just want people to know that if I'm also talking so much about this trip, I really, really believe in it. I wish I could come. I can't, but I wish I could.
Soon.
Yeah.
Soon you will.
Next trip, I hope I can be a part of it too. Amazing.
Yes, we'll love that.
If anyone wants to reach out to you, where can they find you? Specifically you.
So on Facebook, you can look for Margaret or myself on Facebook, send us a message.
Awesome. And Margaret, same thing?
Yes, same thing. Yeah, and I mean, we're both Meghla or Margaret at indiasourcing.net is our email, so we're quite easy to find.
All right, great stuff. Thank you both so much. I can't wait to have you back after the trip to hear how it went and for you to share with us more information on that. And Isabella will be back on Monday and Danny will be back on Tuesday, and I'll see everyone next Thursday. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you, Sharon.
Bye. Bye. Thanks, Sharon.